I'm looking forward to this presentation, Sid. Sid joined the Transportation Research Board's National Cooperative Highway Research Program, NCHRP, in October 2017, and is currently the Associate Program Manager for Implementation and Innovation. In his role, he manages several NCHRP programs on implementation research and development of innovations, and leads efforts to track and document the impact of the use of NCHRP research results. I'm really looking forward to learn more about this, Sid, because taking research to implementation is one of the hardest things to do. Prior to his current position, he was Senior Program Officer managing the NCHRP Implementation Support Program. He has a background in program evaluation, policy analysis, strategic planning, and data management. Prior to joining the NCHRP, he had worked in several parts of the world, including Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Tell you, that part of Africa right now needs a lot of help. Particularly in Niger right now and many other states. It's pretty sad what's going on out there. But in terms of innovation, we researchers at universities, the holy grail is taking the technology and bringing it to practice. And it's the holy grail, but it's also the most satisfying thing when you've spent years and years doing something and then somebody else is using it. Isn't that cool? Now, we love all to publish papers, and that's great, and we should. But there's nothing like publishing papers, and eventually these papers turns into reality in a bridge where somebody is using. So I'm really looking forward to see what Sid has to say about how we take research into practice. Please help me provide a very warm welcome to Sid.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for the very warm introduction. That was really good. So a couple of things I need to mention. When Dale first told me about this conference, I just looked at the venue, Maine, and I said, yes, I'll absolutely be there. It took me a few days to figure out that, well, I actually have to give a presentation. I'm not sure what I'm going to say. I did ask ChatGPT for some help, but yeah. ChatGPT did give me a joke that it insisted I should open with. So I'm going to start with that. I do apologize. It's going to be downhill from there. So why did the bicycle fall down? Because it was too tired. Yeah. So there are definitely some things that human beings can still do better than ChatGPT. Anyways, Sid Mohan with the National Cooperative Highway Research Program at TRB. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to be here with you all this evening. I have a few slides, and I promise you I'm going to go through them really fast because I do realize this is after dinner. And the last thing you want me to do is keep going on and on. So without further ado, there we go. All right, so moving research into implementation. Just a quick background to TRB. For those of y'all who are not familiar about us, we are the Transportation Research Board. We are based in Washington, DC, and we deal with pretty much every single topic that deals with transportation. Everything right from aviation to highways to some of the more newer and upcoming modes of transportation. We've been in existence for about 100 years now. Gives us decades of experience, and I was just joking to my colleagues, maybe not as many decades as Dale, but we do have quite a few under our belt, and our big mission is to mobilize expertise, experience, and knowledge to anticipate and solve transportation-related issues. Our parent organization is the National Academies of Sciences. The National Academies of Sciences was actually established in 1863 by President Lincoln with the explicit mission to investigate, experiment, examine, and report upon any subject of science. We are a standalone organization. We are not a governmental entity. We work with folks from all across the spectrum, right from the government to the private sector to educational institutions to private institutions, and so on. Our aim is to provide nonpartisan, unbiased research and opinions. And what we do is, TRB does three big things. And for those of you all who are familiar with TRB, I do apologize for going over this, but just to set the stage, TRB does three big things. The first thing we do is we advise. We provide a lot of studies. We provide a lot of in-depth analysis of topics that are of great interest in the transportation field. Anything from gas tax increases to how EVs can interact with conventional vehicles in markets. We examine all of these topics and we provide advice on that. We also convene. We have 170 plus standing committees that deal with the whole range of topics. If any of you all have ever interacted with a TRB committee, this is what I'm talking about. We have about 170 of them. We have over 8,000 active volunteers. Volunteers form a big part of our work, and they're really critical to everything we do at TRB. Some of y'all would be familiar with the TRB annual meeting. Yes? Any of you heard of it? All right. So TRB annual meeting is just one of the meetings that we put up. The TRB annual meeting happens in January every year, but we also have a series of other meetings that happen throughout the year on different topics. So that's part of the convening part. And the final part is research. We have 4 big research programs currently underway at TRB. We do research on highways, aviation, traffic safety, and transit. Together, these 4 research programs produce over 100 plus research products every single year. We deal with over 3,000 volunteers. We also put out several publications and other literature that can help that research become reality. And this is why we are interested in this particular topic, implementation. As we all know, research is good, but it becomes even better if folks can actually get to use it, if it's actually put in play, if there's a benefit that's realized from it. And that's why TRB pays a lot of attention towards implementation. We do realize that the implementation landscape is rather varied. There are several organizations that participate in implementation: federal agencies, state and local agencies, research institutions, private sector organizations, industry, and national organizations. All of these different actors play a different role in research implementation, but they play critical roles, no matter what that role is. And what we have learned over the years is there are a few critical factors that go towards successful research implementation, and that's what I'm going to be concentrating on for the next few minutes. These 8, and I'll go over them in a little bit of detail, but basically it's about involving stakeholders, having early adopters and champions, preempting institutional barriers, providing leadership, providing resources for implementation, undertaking demonstrations, evaluating progress, and communicating. Now, there could be several other important factors for implementation, but just to keep this short, I'm just going to go over these 8 for now, and I'm going to look at some examples. Involving stakeholders. We all know involving stakeholders early, involving them continuously is important for success. They often play a role in communication, and they often become early adopters, and bringing them right at the start can definitely ensure the success of whatever product it is that you're working on. An example of that was Michigan DOT. They worked on green warning lights to make winter maintenance trucks more visible. They involved the stakeholders right from the start through the design process, and eventually these participants were also employed to conduct experiments to avoid any impartialities. A great example of involving stakeholders right from the start. Getting early adopters and champions, always valuable. Getting the word out early. Early success is always important, and it's a good catalyst for further adoption. A great example for this is Rhode Island. Rhode Island DOT with through the Transportation Innovation Partnership had a pilot project called Little Roadie. They got their early adopters to get this up and running, and this actually showed that people wanted to see and touch the technology, which made them even more eager to adopt whatever it is that they wanted to adopt. Your very own center here is another good example of an early adopter. And I'm not going to go over this because I'm sure you all know about this. Preempting institutional barriers. Every organization has multiple barriers, right? There's always blowback from senior leadership or blowback from folks at different levels of the organization. People are sometimes resistant to change. It's about setting things in place to overcome these institutional barriers. This needs to be both top down and bottom up. An example of this was Indiana DOT. They get their folks to play a big role in implementing and innovating. They recognize that innovative cultures take root faster when leaders recognize employees. So they wanted to limit bureaucracy. They wanted to improve morale, and they wanted to involve folks right from the start. So about preempting some of those barriers, about getting folks involved right at the start. Providing leadership. I don't think this can be overstated. Providing leadership is important to set the stage to move something from the research stage to the implementation stage. A great example of that is the leadership that's provided by Federal Highways through their Everyday Counts program, as well as through the Accelerating Market Readiness program. Two programs that Federal Highways leads. Federal Highways provides resources for that helps get innovations and research to the market and to practice. Providing resources for implementation. Several times we see great research being done without providing sufficient resources for implementation. We've often come across folks who say that I'm interested in using a particular research product, but I don't have the resources to do that. I don't have the right people. I don't have the funding. I don't have XYZ. So providing those resources for implementation right at the start, thinking about it right during the research phase is always important. An example of that is what we do at NCHRP. We have a program called the NCHRP Implementation Support Program that provides resources for state DOTs to use our research within their respective organizations. We provide the money, we provide the technical expertise, we provide anything else that the DOTs may require. And this ensures that the research is actually used within their organizations, despite whatever limitations they may have. That example photograph is from a project we did in Vermont, where we trained folks from several New England states on UAS operations. And we just recently heard that courtesy of this training, after the floods, the unfortunate floods that Vermont experienced last month, they were actually able to use the training and conduct surveillance and take pictures of the damage and so on. So it was providing that resource that actually led to some positive results. And another example is Minnesota DOT, which does the same thing. They set aside funding every year to help that research move into implementation. They do that right at the start, right when the research is being done. They start setting aside money. They start figuring out what kind of resources will be required for that research to be implemented. And setting the stage right at the start does help. Undertaking demonstrations and showcases. It makes it ready for research to grow. Technology often requires some pilot testing. We know that. So undertaking this is always critical. An example of that is what AASHTO does through their AASHTO Innovation Initiative. It's actually been renamed recently, but they showcase innovations that are ready for demonstrations, or they showcase innovations that have already had a little bit of demonstration done, and they move it on to the next level. This is to give those innovations the opportunity to take hold, to grow, and for other folks to adopt it. Another example is Missouri with their Innovations Challenge. What they do is they identify and share the best innovations for all areas within the department. And what works in one area, they then showcase that in other areas in Missouri, and they make sure that that innovation is then widely spread across the state. Evaluating progress is important. It gives you feedback. It gives folks the reassurance that whatever innovation or implementation you're doing is actually working. Some folks prefer empirical data, and this is where evaluating progress really comes into play. Georgia DOT does that. They do a performance-based definition of research implementation for all of the research projects. They have a dashboard where they show how these projects are actually leading to benefits, and they frequently showcase that to decision makers, to lawmakers, to senior management, to whoever it may need to be shown to, in order to show them that, listen, all the money you're putting into research is actually having some positive benefits. And finally, communicating. This is a personal favorite of mine. We all do great research. Unfortunately, we all don't always do the best communicating on that research. Getting people to understand what your research is about, what kind of benefits it can produce, how it can actually improve lives, or how it can actually improve safety, is something that's rather critical, and it's something that needs to be done on a regular basis. Washington State does this quite often. They have something called Webinar Wednesdays, where they showcase different research projects with these webinars. And the idea is to showcase these in a simple and easy to understand way, so that if you're a technical person, you can make something out of it. If you're a lay person, you can still make something out of it. And sometimes that's important, to make it easy to understand across the board. And so does New Jersey. New Jersey has a technology transfer portal where, again, they take the research that they do, they take the implementation efforts that they do, and they put it in forms that are easy to disseminate, easy to communicate, and therefore try and get much more users for their research. So to recap, 8 things that we think were important. And I do have a confession to make. I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning because I had to drive down here because of all the crazy weather. And I do apologize for stumbling through this presentation, but it just hit me right when I started that I am really fading really fast. I promise you, it's not as bad as this. But yeah, no excuse again. But I hope at the end of the day, if I can leave you with a couple of messages. These are some of the critical factors for implementation. These are not all the factors, these are just some of those factors. Think about these things when you are doing your respective projects. You can look at these things from a project perspective, from a programmatic perspective, from an organizational perspective, right? But look at all of these things and think about how you could incorporate some of these into your respective projects and programs. The second thing I want to leave you with is, there's a lot of really good examples out there. My attempt through this presentation was to try and show you all what's happening out there with different organizations. It would have been rather easy, and I could have done it in my sleep, actually, if that was indeed the case, to talk about what we do at TRB, but that was not my intention. I wanted to show you all some of the good stuff that other organizations are doing out there, be it DOTs, be it the university, be it whoever else. So there's some really good examples out there. Reach out to them, try and get some insights from them in terms of how they did things and see if that works for you. And the final thing I want to say is a question we are always asked is, what is the value of whatever it is that we do in dollar amounts? So if I were to ask you, what's the value of all the stuff that you do, would you be able to give me an answer? And it frequently is. I know there's been a lot of really smart people who've been trying to put a dollar amount on research, on transportation research. They've come up with some pretty complicated formulas that probably require 3 PhDs to understand, but at the end of the day, we still haven't been able to answer that properly. My favorite go-to answer these days is $1.4 trillion. And it's not a random number, unfortunately. It's $1.4 trillion is the contribution of transportation to GDP last year. All right. So while you may not be able to put a dollar amount on your particular effort, at least know that it's contributing to that 1.4 trillion. That 1.4 trillion didn't happen by itself. It's a culmination of all these different efforts from all over the place over the years. So if that's the number I'm going to leave you with, I will leave you with that. Again, I do apologize, but thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Sid. And I'm amazed you're still up and functioning. And remember the number 1.4 trillion. And I'm not gonna put you through questions from the audience. I don't think it's the time to do that. Well, that concludes the event for tonight. I'm looking forward to see you all tomorrow morning.